Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 7, New Delhi, 1924 to 1928. British India's newly elected National Assembly met for the first time in New Delhi on January 31, 1924. Jinnah wasted no time inviting all 23 independents to confer with him immediately after the Viceroy's opening address. Ingenious negotiator, practical politician that he was, he managed to define a program of basic reforms that he convinced all his prima donna colleagues to join forces and work towards achieving. He was then in position to go to Motilal Nehru and C.R. Das, offering to merge his powerful swing bloc of independent votes with their plurality of 42 Swarajist party members who could rout the phalanx of 36 official appointees whenever they wished. A new nationalist party was thus born within the assembly overnight. Much to Reading's amazement and dismay, this powerful Indian bloc of elected representatives committed to achieving dominion status and fully responsible provincial government at the earliest possible date had been conjured into existence miraculously, it seemed, from the disparate dross of individuals who posed no threat, no political challenge to officialdom, till touched by the welding fire of Jinnah's brilliant alchemy. So he repeated it in New Delhi, much the same feat of political unification he had achieved at Lucknow. Only the magic formula did not extend as far this time, nor last quite as long. Jinnah's assembly strategy bore fruit in February 1924 when a resolution on constitutional reforms recommended the early summoning of a round-table conference with due regard to the protection of the rights and interests of important minorities, and to take steps to have the Government of India Act revised with a view to establish full responsible government in India. The resolution carried by a vote of 78 to 48, and as a result, Lord Reading appointed a Reforms Inquiry Committee chaired by Home Member Sir Alexander Madiman. Jinnah served on that committee with 4 other Indians. Madras's Sir P.S. Sirvasmami, Sir 1864 to 1946, President of the National Liberal Federation, Pune educator Dr. R. P. Paranjpai, 1877 to 1969, Allahabad's barrister Sir Taj Bahadur Sapru, 1875 to 1949, and the Punjab's Sir Muhammad Shal, law member of the Government of India. The committee soon came to be referred to among the elected members within the assembly as the Jinnah's Committee. Jinnah drafted a national demand minority report by the year's end, but official fears of growing effectiveness and escalating demands of the united elected majority were by then so strong that the Viceroy vetoed several attempts to debate the Reforms Inquiry Committee reports, thus squelching Jinnah's recommendations. The Pakistan movement and its singular impact on recent Indian history have tended to obscure Jinnah's positive contribution to the evolution of parliamentary government in India. Much of his time and talent, however, were lavished on fashioning legislation, arguing for or against budget items, and trying to keep officials as well as nationalists' colleagues intellectually honest, just as Gokhale had been for the Central Legislative Council of Calcutta. Jinnah emerged in this interlude as the gadfly of Delhi's assembly, speaking to most resolutions, pursuing every document and report with the precision of a lawyer, and expressing himself without fear or hope of favor. Speaking, for example, to the resolution designed to empower the Assembly to review government contracts, strongly opposed by officialdom, Jinnah argued, "What is the difficulty? It is only an excuse. It is the same old story. The executive does not wish to stand the searchlight of this House in entering into engagements of a serious character. I say there is absolutely no justification. And to a bill proposed to require passports for entry into British India, Jinnah remarked, "Sir, I think that all regulations which impose passports are the biggest nuisance, and sooner they are done away with, the better." In February of 1924, he introduced an important resolution that went to the heart of India's struggle for economic independence, insisting that the government of India be allowed to purchase its vast and valuable stores through rupee tenders submitted in India rather than only through sterling bids made in London. Although this resolution of mine may not interest every member of the House, it being a very dry subject, Jinnah began dryly, "I have no doubt that when honorable members understand this question, they will realize that it affects India most vitally." He then reviewed the history of some 75 years of imperial purchases that inhibited Indian economic development, concluding, "It gives a tremendous advantage to the British manufacturers who are on the spot, who get the information first, and invariably it is really for all practical purposes confined to the tenders coming from British firms in England." Moreover, Jinnah argued that during the war, necessity dictated the purchase of many stores in India. Jinnah's resolution carried and probably did more to stimulate Indian economic development prior to the independence than any other measure passed by the Assembly. Jinnah remained a great civil libertarian, always outspoken in defense of individual rights and equal justice. "Sir," he insisted on behalf of the deported editor of Bombay Chronicle, B.G. Horniman, "I do not maintain, and I have drunk deep at the fountain of constitutional law, that the liberty of man is the dearest thing in the law of any constitution, and it should not be taken away in this fashion. If you have any case, Mr. Horniman has committed an offense, place him before a tribunal. I speak very feelingly because I feel that no man should be deported, and certainly not on such fabricated allegations as these, which to my knowledge are absolutely false." That September in Simla, Jinnah reiterated his firm belief in this principle that no man's property or liberty should be touched without a judicial trial. In debating another bill the same day, Jinnah objected to the Home Minister's motion, remarking, "I am not standing here merely as a person who distrusts government, but I am standing here as a representative of the people, and the government have got to do what is best for the people, and not as it pleases their whims." That May, Jinnah presided over a special session of the Muslim League in Lahore. Since the commencement of 1923, it was realized and admitted that the triple boycott was a failure, and that the mass civil disobedience could not be undertaken successfully in the near future, Jinnah argued. His return to the active political life had diminished his recent pessimism. Boycott of councils, as desired by Mahatma Gandhi, was far from being effective or useful. The Khilafat organization which was carried on could not claim any better position. The result of the struggle of the last 3 years has this to our credit, that there is an open movement for the achievement of Swaraj for India. There is a fearless and persistent demand that steps must be taken for the immediate establishment of dominion responsible government in India. And returning to the theme he stressed since first joining the League in 1913, Jinnah cautioned India never to forget that one essential requisite requirement to achieve Swaraj is political unity between the Hindus and the Mohammedans. I am almost inclined to say that India will get dominion responsible government the day Hindus and Mohammedans are reunited. Swaraj is an almost interchangeable term with Hindu-Muslim unity. The Muslim League resolved at this important meeting to work for Swaraj, defined as Federal Union of Provinces, fully autonomous except for a minimal number of central government functions of general and common concern. Full religious liberty was to be guaranteed to all communities, and separate electorates were to remain for India Muslims. Since joint electorates were deemed a source of discord and disunion, as well as wholly inadequate to achieve the object of effective representation, nor was any bill or resolution affecting any community to be passed in any legislature or in any other elected body if three-fourths of that community's elected members opposed it. The League also appointed a special committee headed by Jinnah to frame a scheme for a constitution for the government of India. Viewing this with great alarm, the deplorable bitterness of feeling at present existing between the Hindus and the Muslims, the League further resolved to cooperate in establishing conciliatory boards on which members of all communities could meet regularly to resolve communal differences and to try to alleviate causes of conflict. Jinnah moved the above resolutions as well as one deploring the present scandalous state of disorganization existing among Muslims in all spheres of life, which not only prevents all healthy interchange of ideas and cooperation for the good of the community, but also seriously handicaps the Muslims in shouldering their proper share of responsibility in the national struggle for progress and self-government. One committee was to stimulate internal solidarity among the Muslims of India, and another, also chaired by Jinnah, would confer with the Central Khilafat Committee. Jinnah was elected permanent president of the League for the next 3 years to give him time to carry out this ambitious plan of revitalization of Muslim India. 3 years was not enough, but it was a beginning. The cornerstone was blasted out of the Khilafat movement by Turkey's president Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, 1881 to 1938, who formally abolished the caliphate in October 1924. The fallout in India from that shattered pillar of pan-Islam included accelerating Hindu-Muslim riots. From the Pathans of the northwest frontier to the Moplas of Malabar, from Kashmir to Dhaka, outraged Muslims the length and breadth of South Asia turned against neighboring Hindus to vent frustrations at having lost their caliph. Hindus in turn retaliated with militant revivalist organizations like the Mahasabha, launching programs of forced conversions of unwilling Muslims to Hinduism. Paramilitary organizations drilled and marched through Hindu-dominated cities, noisily luring Muslims from prayer in their mosques, indiscriminately attacking leather workers or cow slaughterers. Each flurry led to more retaliatory raids, provoking full-fledged riots, leaving countless dead, wounded, and embittered. Motilal Nehru, as head of the Swarajist fraction within Congress, thus fell mortally ill in 1924, was Gandhi's only competitor for leadership of that organization. In August 1924, in a very confidential letter, the Mahatma wrote Motilal to inform him that he was prepared to facilitate your securing the Congress machinery, actually assisting you to do so, and would in no case be party to vote catching, claiming no interest in anything but promoting a peaceful atmosphere, and adding, if you are not prepared to take over the whole of the Congress machinery, I am quite prepared to facilitate your taking over those provinces where you think you have no difficulty in running it. Almost as an afterthought, however, in the very same letter, Gandhi named those who have been insistent that he, Gandhi, should become president himself, concluding, "The only condition that will make me reconsider my position would be your desire that I should accept. Will you please consult Messrs. Das, Kelkar, and others and let me know what you would advise?" The Mahatma continued boycott of all councils undermined Motilal's position within both Legislative Assembly and Congress. Gandhi had published a statement of fundamental difference with the Swarajists that May, concluding that council entry is inconsistent with non-cooperation as I conceive it. Motilal was thus faced with the need to choose by mid-1924 between continuing his party's assembly alliance with Jinnah and risking the loss of Gandhi's confidence and erosion of his Congress position or moving the other way. It was not an easy decision. The elder Nehru wrestled with it all summer, inviting Gandhi to stay as his guest at the family beach house in Bombay's Juhu during August, trying to convince the Mahatma of the nation-building utility of Swarajist work within the assembly. Motilal's son, Jawaharlal, who was Congress secretary that year, joined them for those vacation summits, but recalled that he and his father did not succeed in winning Gandhiji or even in influencing him to any extent. The Mahatma's only match for stubbornness in recent India history was Jinnah. Behind all the friendly talks and the courteous gestures, the fact remained that there was no compromise, wrote the younger Nehru. I also returned from Juhu disappointed, for Gandhiji did not resolve a single one of my doubts. As is usual with him, he refused to look into the future or lay down any long distance program. Jawaharlal rightly called it a tug of war between his father and Gandhi. Capitulating to Gandhi's position, Motilal got his assembly Swarajists to agree after mid-year to throw out all proposals for legislative enactments by which the bureaucracy proposes to consolidate its power. While admitting it is conceivable that some good may incidentally result from a few of such measures, Motilal insisted, "We are clearly of the opinion that in the larger interest of the country, it is better to temporarily sacrifice such little benefits rather than add an iota to the powers of the bureaucracy." That Swarajist statement presaged the death of the Nationalist Party, for Jinnah and his independents refused to engage in obstructionist tactics within the assembly, continuing to consider each motion on its merits, voting for or against a measure only because they believed it might advance or retard the economic or constitutional development of India. During his visit to Bombay that summer, Gandhi spoke to the Parsi circle at Excelsior Theatre to raise funds for Malabar flood relief. Kanji Dwarkados attended the meeting and walked in Jinnah's Nagpur footsteps, addressing Gandhi as Mr. and noting that a great deal of dirty work had been done under the mantle of Mahatma. Kanji was loudly heckled from the audience, but Gandhi rose on this occasion to his critics' defense, stating that the word Mahatma stinks in my nostrils, and in addition to that, when somebody insists that everyone must call me Mahatma, I get nausea. I do not wish to live. Had I not known that the more I insist on the word Mahatma not being used, the more it come into vogue, I would most certainly have insisted. In the ashram where I live, every child, brother and sister has orders not to use the word Mahatma. It was the closest he came to a public apology to Jinnah for what had happened at Nagpur almost 4 years earlier. He must have known that Kanji would report what he said to Mr. and Mrs. J. Ruthie saw almost as much of Kanji by now as she did of her busy husband and communicated more openly and more intimately with him. She had turned to mysticism for solace, and Kanji was her guide in the realm of seances, magnetizing, and thought transference. Wrote Kanji. Ruthie was intensely interested in contacting the non physical world, and she made difficult and dangerous experiments to verify her beliefs and convictions. She wanted first hand knowledge. Just how difficult or dangerous her experiments were is unclear, but she seems to have been taking drugs for some time, initially to help her cope with insomnia and depression, perhaps. Opium, morphine, hashish, and cocaine were, of course, readily available in the port of Bombay. She wrote Kanji in November 1924. There is a matter about which I am most anxious to speak with you, as I think you can help me. Lately, I have been very much drawn towards the subject of spirit communication, and I am most anxious to know more and to get at the truth. It is such an elusive subject, and the more I hear of it, the more puzzled do I become, though still more passionately interested. I have some sort of an idea that you must be cognizant of spiritual circles in our city whose seance one may join. I don't profess any creed, nor do I subscribe to a belief, but I am too deeply immersed in the matter now to give it up without some personal satisfaction, for I cannot content myself with other people's experiences. I would prefer my identity, however, to remain unknown while you make enquiries, and I sincerely hope that you will be able to assist me. A month later, Ruthie wrote again to remind him that what I am after is a seance controlled by some experienced medium, as I am most anxious to get a personal experience of this matter in which I so passionately believe. Her loneliness, her desperate need for someone to talk with and to discuss questions that interested her so passionately was palpable. Do come and see me soon so that we may resume our chat of the last occasion. My dear Kanji, she wrote the following April. Yes, I know of the dream travels of which you speak, but I do all my dreaming in my waking hours. There is nothing I would welcome with greater rejoicing than an experience of the sort to which you refer in your letter. But in my heavy drug like sleep, there is no redeeming feature. 5 or at most 6 hours rest, a restive mind, and a correspondingly restless physical state. I don't dream, excepting very rarely. She was now 25 years old. My soul is too clogged, and though I aspire and crave, God knows how earnestly my researches remain uncrowned, even by thorns. I am feeling peculiarly restless and wish one with psychic powers could come to my assistance. She tried her best to arouse her husband's interest in such things. Writing to report to Kanji, she even thought she had succeeded. I am slowly but surely drawing Jay's interest into the matter, and by alternate bullying and coaxing, I got him to read that book, The Spirit of Irene. Jay had to admit that it was remarkable and irrefutable. The incident deals with the tracing of a murder. It revolves around a poor girl, a cook, who was decoyed from London to Boscombe and then done to death. The details of the crime are horrible, it having been a crime of lust. The police, being baffled by the cunning of the man, were at their wits' end, or you may be sure they would not have consented to hold seance. Anyway, they got the needed clue, and the evidence was of such a nature that the unfortunate man was hanged. Jay was not at all events able to find any flaw in the case. One can hardly imagine Jinnah devoting much time or attention to Irene. His legal practice alone remained so demanding that Ruthie added in this letter of April 12, 1925, "It doesn't look as we are going to Kashmir after all, as Jay is engaged in the Baula case." Kanji kept her well supplied with books of all kinds, his own literary reviews and plays. She especially enjoyed Noel Coward. Throughout 1925, he saw her regularly 3 or 4 times a week. Dina was now 6, and Kanji tried to convince Ruthie to send her to school in Madras at the headquarters of Mrs. Besant's Theosophical Society. Jinnah resisted that move, sensing no doubt that it would further alienate her daughter from her own community. He may have feared he would soon lose his only daughter, as Sir Dinshaw had lost his. By June 1925, Ruthie was ill again and wrote, "Dear Kanji, as it was nearing 2 a.m., I am frightfully tired and sleepy, but the thought of you having come to me, I simply had to crawl out of bed to write to you, to ease my conscience if nothing else. Will you excuse me and let me get back now?" She told Jinnah in July that she would go with Kanji to the Theosophical Society's Jubilee Convention in Madras that December. The Muslim League would meet in Aligarh. She was to have been initiated as a Theosophist by Mrs. Besant at the Jubilee. But then Ruffles' cat fell ill, delaying her departure a week. She did, however, meet Annie Besant at Adyar before year's end, and the older woman immediately perceived how unhappy she was, reproving Kanji's amazement at that verdict with, "Don't you see unhappiness in her eyes? Look at her." Despite his disclaimers of interest, Gandhi finally did preside over the Congress in 1925, but as he insisted, only as a businessman presides at the business meetings. The 1921 census figures revealed such rapid growth among Muslims in both wings of the north that they were now a majority in the Punjab, 58.4%, and in Bengal, 52.7%. This development stimulated demands for renegotiating the Lucknow Pact formula, with many League leaders from both Muslim majority provinces no longer willing to rest content with the prospect of mere minority council status. The wedge of communal separation was thus driven deeper, irreversibly dividing the Muslim League from the Congress, even as Muslim disillusion with Gandhian methods of non-cooperation grew. It was Reading's final year in India. The Viceroy valued Jinnah's assembly work highly enough to offer to include his name December on the coveted list he was recommending for knighthood, if only Jinnah would agree to accept that honor. "I prefer to be plain Mr. Jinnah," he replied. "I have lived as plain Mr. Jinnah, and I hope to die as plain Mr. Jinnah." Ruthie reportedly responded to a query of how she would like being addressed Lady Jinnah by snapping, "If my husband accepts knighthood, I will take a separation from him." The latter course may have been an option she contemplated by now. It was one she would, at any rate, exercise a few years later, even though Jinnah was never knighted. His increased conservatism and growing Islamic consciousness contributed to the ideological gulf that divided them. There were more personal gulfs as well. He was practically 50, she was half that age, and they were attuned to different harmonies. Not that he ever stopped loving her. He hoped, in fact, that they might recapture the magic of their early years in the spring and summer of 1926, when he took her abroad with him on a tour that included London, Paris, Canada, and the United States. Jinnah had been appointed to the Assembly's Sandhurst Committee in 1925, chaired by the then Army Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Sir Andrew Andrews keen to study the feasibility of establishing a military college like Sandhurst in India. He was one of the 3 Indian subcommittee members invited to undertake the grand tour of inspection of military colleges and installations overseas, leaving Bombay early in April and returning home in August. Ruthie was nervous about the trip and wrote her friend shortly before leaving. Kanji, I'm going away to Europe and the USA for a few months. You will not be with me to protect me and help me. Do please, therefore, magnetize something for me to keep me in touch with you. She gave him a beautiful jade brooch she wore, and he magnetized it with thoughts of love and protection. Jinnah never believed in such things and used to laugh at her for putting faith in amulets. Ruthie reported to Kanji after her return home. But instead of being a second honeymoon, it was their final trip together. Ruthie's health deteriorated rapidly after their trip abroad. I suppose we all have our moments of melancholy and moments when everything seems to be impeding and yet nothing happens. A sort of waiting mood, and one just waits and grows distrustful of life. She wrote her best friend early in 1927. I am always glad when you come. So don't please let any idea of my not being strong enough and well enough to keep you away. P.S. I am quite all right again, and were it not that my feet are ugly and swollen, I should be getting about as usual. As it is, I go calling at my friends, and tonight I am going to the cinema in bedroom slippers, as no shoes are large enough to accommodate my elegant and lily-like feet. Had x-rays taken and find that the broken needle is still there. So, am trying to make up my mind to undergo another operation. She lavished most of her time and emotional energy now on her numerous pets, cats and dogs, each of which she pampered, nursed and treated as a child. For unlike Dina, who was out all day at school or preoccupied with friends, the pets were hers alone to fondle, spoil, and project all of her feelings and fears upon. The Muslim League's devoted secretary, Sayyid Shamsul Hassan, wrote that after the shifting of the League office to Delhi in February 1927, I acted as a sort of chamberlain to the Qaid, Jinnah, whenever he visited Delhi. His relations with his wife, Maryam, Ruthie's Muslim name, were estranged during this period, and he resided alone sometimes at Cecil, one of old Delhi's best hotels, or Maidens, and sometimes at the Western Courts, the accommodation provided by the government for the members of the Legislative Assembly. He was not as careful about his health as in other matters. The Delhi winters did not suit him, and he often suffered from severe attacks of cold and flu. In spite of his poor health, he attended the assembly and devoted most of his time and energy to political activities. This may have marked the beginning of the complex and compounded malignant lung disease that would take his life 21 years later. Was it coincidence that Jinnah's powerful constitution should have suddenly started to deteriorate then? His separation from Ruthie was surely a severe blow. Her lungs and body were more afflicted than his and too frail to survive another 2 years. And the combination of the Delhi winters, knowing he had lost the one love of his life, and the collapse of his faith in the bona fides of an imperial system he had always trusted, irreparably wounded him. He would never breathe easily again. For India as a whole, as well as for Jinnah personally, 1927 was a year of shattered hopes and dreams. A full decade had expired since Montagu's ringing words had given wings to soaring nationalist expectations. Yet dominion status, independence, Swaraj seemed more remote than ever. Indian Secretary of State Lord Birkenhead, 1872 to 1930, and his Tory clique knew that their own days of Westminster power were numbered, making them all the more determined to burn their brand of narrow imperial rule into India's hide. Ramsay MacDonald's Labour opposition was growing stronger with every by-election, and rather than wait for the inevitable Labour victory that would come in 1929, the Tory cabinet decided to jump the gun by appointing its own Royal Statutory Commission in 1927, carrying out the mandate of the Act of 1919 well before the deadline expired to chart the next step in constitutional advance for India. Birkenhead could now choose the membership of that mighty commission and appointed his barrister friend Sir John Simon, 1873 to 1954, and 6 other Englishmen, all equally uninformed about India. Reading's successor as Viceroy, Edward Wood, Lord Irwin, later Halifax, 1881 to 1959, more sympathetic and sensitive to Indian feelings, had urged the appointment of at least 2 Indian members on this blue ribbon body. But Birkenhead wanted his jury, as he thought of them, to do their research in India without any preconceived prejudice. Jinnah had written the Viceroy in June explicitly to warn him that the personnel of the Commission is far more important than any other factor in this matter. Had he hoped to be appointed himself? Most probably. He was always generous in helping government with his time and deep understanding of what needed to be done to reform India's constitution, and work was his only solace now. Doubly bitter was the draught of rejection Jinnah was obliged to swallow then, with the rest of India's ignored and wasted leadership, which was so publicly repudiated that November by Lord Birkenhead's lily white list. As if with one impassioned voice, India would respond, "Simon, go back." When the commission reached Bombay's port February next, its years of projected labor doomed, torpedoed before it ever got underway by the pig-headedness of a narrow-minded coterie of imperial managers who put their selfish interests above the needs, aspirations, and just demands of most of humankind. The Muslim League divided over the Simon Commission issue. A small group, mostly from Punjab, lined up behind ex-law minister Shafi and met in Lahore, where they voted to welcome and cooperate with the commission. Most members of the League's council, however, joined the Jinnah group in Calcutta, meeting on December 30th, 1927 and New Year's Day, 1928. Annie Besant and Sarojini Naidu attended as honoured guest, and the Aga Khan was to have presided, but he withdrew at the last moment. Maulvi Muhammad Yaqub took his place and delivered his presidential address